something you don't understand. All right, there we go, guys. Morning again. You know, I have to get all of this out of the way before my day gets a little too hectic. And so today we are going to be continuing the reading of the book Grace Under Fire. For those of you who have been reading with me, I hope you have been enjoying the reading as much as I have been enjoying bringing it to you. Now, Michael and Isabel are in Scotland. They are learning quite a bit about the land that Isabel is supposedly inheriting. And it seems like there are obstacles each way they go because now there is one guy who has taken up possession of the property, saying that he was the son, saying that he is the son of Isabel's uncle. So he has taken up possession on Glen McKenna, and he is charging the people rent around there. He's really holding his own, and he's some kind of a mean-spirited individual. So that is going to be a challenge that for Isabel and Michael. Is this person going to be able to come to an agreement with them amicably? Will they have to call the police? Is this person violent enough to maybe try to take Isabel's life? Who knows? Who knows? But things are really, really heating up in that direction. Isabel is determined to confront this person. Michael is determined to have her not confront anybody. And so the two of them are at loggerheads about what their next move is. So as we continue reading in chapter 27, we will find out what else is happening as Isabel and Michael are going through the Highlands in Scotland, trying to get to Glen McKenna, the place where Isabel has just inherited from her dead uncle. For those of you who have been following me, I want to say thank you all so much for coming. I sincerely appreciate you all. Chapter 27. Let me see, because we read for an hour already. Okay, 8:19. So we finish reading at 9:19, about 9:20. Michael was feeling guilty because he knew he had hurt Isabel's feelings. He probably shouldn't have been so blunt, but he had told her the truth. He did want to get her safely back to Boston, and he did need to get on with his life. He was expected at Quantico at the end of August, where he would begin training to become an FBI agent. Once he achieved that goal, he planned to work his way into the department he was most qualified for and go after homegrown terrorists and power-hungry deviants, put them away before they could come up with bigger and better ways to blow up the world. It was all mapped out, but he couldn't get anywhere until he was certain Isabel was safe and those who wanted to hurt her were behind bars. Only then could he move on. But a future without Isabel at his side driving him crazy? He couldn't imagine anything more depressing. Isabel watched Michael remove the map from the glove compartment and study it for a minute. Then he folded it, put it away, and started driving again. She didn't ask any questions. She was too angry and frustrated to talk to him now. She needed to get her temper under control before she said anything she would regret. She was a lady after all, she reminded herself, and wouldn't use any of the foul words racing through her mind. Wonder she want me use them fair. But anywho, OMG, Michael really was a bonehead. Did he have any idea what he was giving up when he moved on with his life? She was all a man could ever want. Damn it. Why couldn't he see that? She reasoned it through. Michael wasn't only a bonehead, he was also dense, which in her opinion was just another word for stupid. With all his degrees and awards and only God knows what else, When it came to relationships, Michael was almost as dense as she was. She had no business falling for such a stupid man. Someone should have warned her. She thought about it for a minute and then decided she needed to write a song about it. She's bringing out the Taylor Swift in her right here. Michael was just about to apologize for hurting her feelings, but then he glanced at her. She looked serene and happy. What was that about? He told her he was going to get on with his life, and she's happy? He expected a little pushback at the very least. Then she smiled at him. He couldn't explain why that made him mad. Isabel was much calmer now and enjoying coming up with the lyrics she thought were funny but true about men in general and Michael in particular. Unfortunately, they were too inappropriate to sing. She even had a couple of titles in mind. Men Are Jerks was one. Michael Buchanan is a colossal, insensitive, obtuse jerk was another. That was way too long for a title, of course. She'd have to shorten it to Colossal Jerk. Yes, that would work. She knew she would never write the song or sing it, but it made her feel better just thinking about it. She continued to ignore Michael as they drove through the countryside. It had been another rainy day, and the dark sky cast a grey shadow on the land. But when they reached the top of a particular steep hill, the sun suddenly broke through the clouds, and a golden orange light billowed out over the valley below. Michael parked between two Scots pines to face the view. Then he turned the motor off and sat back. "Do you know where we are?" he asked. "Glen McKenna?" She guessed. "Yes, it is safe to be here?" I don't know. I took back roads. There was very little traffic, and I made sure no one was following us. So yeah, we're safe for now. What do you think of your Glen?" She was in awe. She had a panoramic view, and it was perfect. "Isabel?" He said her name after a minute when she hadn't answered him. "It's beautiful. Pristine." She wasn't exaggerating. The view was spectacular. There were gently rolling hills in the distance and black-faced sheep in the meadow, grazing on grass so green it looked like velvet. More sheep dotted the hills beyond. A clear, wide stream flowed down from the highest hill and curled like a ribbon across the valley floor. Squinting against the sun, she thought she caught a glimpse of a waterfall near the peak of that same hill. She was probably wrong, but it was a fanciful hope all the same. There were some stone cottages as well, but only a few dotting the hills. The longer Isabel studied the landscape, the stronger her determination grew to keep it out of Patterson's hands. She wasn't going to let anyone destroy this magnificent land. She was going to sell it to someone ethical who would value it. Finding the right buyer would be difficult, but not impossible. She would put stipulations in the sale to make sure they would protect the land and keep it as beautiful and unspoiled as it was now. "It's almost too perfect to be real," she remarked. "Like paradise, almost." "There's a serpent living in one of those cottages." "Ah, Harcus." As they sat quietly gazing over the beautiful scene, Isabel began to daydream. What would it be like to live here, she wondered. She could be hiking up the hills, she supposed. She had never hiked before, but there was always a first time for a new adventure. And fishing. She could go fishing too. Though she had never attempted it, she was sure she would enjoy it. Michael's cell phone rang, pulling her back to reality. She looked at the caller ID and said, "Inspector Sinclair." The conversation was quick, and then Michael ended the call. He told Isabel, "The inspector wants us to meet him at Rosemore Police Station." "Where's Rosemore?" she asked, reaching for the map again. He scratched his jaw. "I'm not sure. His assistant gave me directions, but he was talking so fast and his broker was so thick, I only caught a couple of words. It's past Grave. He laughed and added, at least that's what I think I heard. I speak 5 languages, but I didn't understand any of what that man was saying. I'm not even sure it was English. I love their brogue. The sound is musical. He could come up with a lot of words to describe their brogue. Musical wasn't one of them. Getting to Garvey was easy, but finding Rosemore took work. The GPS on Michael's phone wasn't any help, and there weren't any signs. They could have stopped and asked someone, but Michael was a Buchanan, so that wasn't going to happen. Men in his family didn't ask for directions. When they finally found Rosemore, they were surprised by how large the village was. Someone really needs to put up a couple of signs, Isabel said. Isn't it pretty here that all the flowers are blooming? Michael noticed 2 teenage boys, one with a bloody nose, fighting over a package, and a drunken older man throwing up in the trash bin. And yet, Isabel noticed the flowers blooming. She always saw beauty in everything. Even people she looked for and usually found some good in them. No wonder he was drawn to her. She had a sweet and pure heart with a bit of vinegar in her attitude towards him anyway. Sister Winston, what's up? How you doing, my love? Good to see you. The building they were looking for was painted white with blue trim. If there had been a police sign on the lamppost out front, they would have thought Sinclair greeted them at the door. He was a handsome man and terribly polite. Tall and thin, he was impeccably dressed in his dark blue uniform and starched white long-sleeved shirt with a navy blue tie. Isabel thought he looked quite stylish. His hair was blonde and trimmed in a buzz cut. His mannerisms reminded her of Detective Samuel, though the inspector was much younger, perhaps in his late 30s. There were 2 other men waiting to meet him. The older of the 2 told her his name was Matthew. He shook her hand, then turned to answer the phone. The younger man's name was Danny, and he looked as though he had just gotten out of school. As soon as he opened his mouth, she knew he was the fast talker who had given Michael directions over the phone. She had to seriously concentrate on what he was saying to understand him. Once the introductions were made, Sinclair led them into an office around the corner from the entrance and asked them to take a seat. I'm borrowing this office, he remarked as he walked behind the desk and sat in an old chair that squeaked. Your offices are in Inverness, Isabel asked. That's right, Miss McKenna. Please call me Isabel. Matthew called out from the other room. Inspector, they're waiting for you whenever you are ready. We have a suspect in custody we believe is the man who was with Jacoby. Where is he? Isabel asked, astonished by the unexpected news. In one of the rooms down the hall. She jumped to her feet. Here? He's here? There's no reason for alarm, the inspector said. He's handcuffed to a table and can't get anywhere near you. Don't you worry. Michael saw the look on Isabel's face, took her hand, and tugged her back into the chair next to him. I don't think she's worried, Inspector. I think she probably would like to have a minute alone with him. I don't believe in violence, she said, unless someone tried to shoot me, she thought. Who is he? Michael asked. Oscar Ferris, he answered. We caught him up here. We'll be transporting him to Inverness soon. Thanks to some quick work by the FBI, we know he flew to Boston from Inverness and was met by Leon Jacoby. Surveillance cameras show Ferris and Jacoby at the airport leaving together. Ferris used his own passport, he thought to add. Has he told you anything? Michael asked. Not yet, but he will in due time, the inspector promised. Ferris isn't a stranger to trouble. He has got quite a long rap sheet. You are certain he's the man I saw? She asked. There was a large computer monitor on the desk. He turned it towards Michael and Isabel and pushed the key. And there he was, slouched in a metal chair. The suspect had a swollen look on his face. He had bright orange-red hair, and when he looked directly into the camera, she could see how cold his eyes were. He didn't look at all that old, but the years of crime had already hardened him. Is he the man? The inspector asked. Yes, I think so. I only saw him for a few seconds or two, so I couldn't say with absolute certainty that he's the one. We were able to send his photos to Detective Walsh in America. He has assured us that this is the man he fought with and whose gun he took. It was Jacoby who shot at you. Okay, so you all remember. But that is very strange. That means they have been trying to harm Isabel for a very long time. Because remember at the very beginning of the story, Isabel had gone to Boston. And it was while she was in Boston and had taken that walk from the hotel that she had encountered Detective Walsh and the person who eventually shot her. And remember when she had gone into the hotel and she saw the crowd, and in the crowd she saw the man with the red hair, and she had looked at the video of that the people had taken of the incident between her and Walt and the man she had shot and killed, and there was also a man with the red hair, and she thought it was the same person. So now they are in Scotland, and this is the same man. So this man has been on a mission to kill her for a very long time. I wonder why. Could it be for the land she inherited in Scotland? Well, that was pretty early. It seems like as soon as the will was signed, this man was sent to take out Isabel. That's interesting. But let us continue the reading. Welcome into the live, everybody. How is everybody doing this morning? Good to see you all. Thank you all so much for coming. I sincerely appreciate you all for coming into the live. I notice you all don't wake up out of bed early. You know, look like I'm me alone, an early riser. You don't wake up out of bed early. Ah, boy. All right. Let us continue. Let us continue. All right. Where are we? All right. He has assured us that this is the man he fought with and whose gun he took. It was Jacoby who shot you. When are you going to question him? Michael asked. I'd like to go in with you. Sinclair was amenable to the idea, but said, you may ask questions, but you can't touch him. I know you would probably like to strike him or give him a couple of jabs because he and Jacoby tried to kill your... Sinclair glanced from Michael to Isabel and then back to Michael again. It was apparent he didn't know what their relationship was and therefore didn't know what to call her. Isabel could have said something, but she remained silent. She was curious to find out what category Michael would put her in. Friend, lover, or distant relative? She shivered at that thought. Although her sister was married to Michael's brother, Isabel was in no way related to Michael. Thank God. She'd be breaking nearly every commandment if she was. He could call her a hookup, she supposed. No, a hookup was for one night, and she had slept with Michael more than once, so that wouldn't work. Might as well call her what she was. Easy. She almost nodded, but caught herself in time. That's exactly what she was with Michael. Easy. Isabel is a friend of the family. Are you kidding me? A friend of the family? She could feel her face heating up. He couldn't say she was a close friend or just a friend. No, he had to make it even more impersonal. A friend of the family. Oh my God. Okay, if that's the way he wanted it, then that's the way it was going to be. Inspector, may I go in with you? She asked. No. Michael's voice had a real bite to it. Sinclair was more diplomatic. He told her in a very calm way and a very reasonable tone. Let me see who the people in the chat. I see Sister Winsome there. Well, so no, so I not see too well from a distance. I don't see too well from a distance. Let me see if I can find the live. If I can find the live on YouTube, then if I can find it on YouTube, say YouTube will give me a fight to see. You can't even bother with them. YouTube will give me a fight. And then the retarded StreamYard. I just, I can't deal with StreamYard, so StreamYard is good, but this is not coming on, so let me just continue reading. Because I don't know, my internet is, my phone them now come on. When my kids wake up, I have to ask them to help me, because this phone here is connected to the iPad, so it and the iPad coming on, but the others aren't. So let me just go and do what I'm doing. Where was I? Okay, let's read this again. Inspector, may I go in with you? She asked. No. Michael's voice had a bite to it. Sinclair was more diplomatic. He told her in a calm, reasonable tone. Then may I watch or listen to the interview? She asked the inspector, completely ignoring Michael. Yes, of course. Just sit back and watch the monitor. He tilted the screen to her and walked out of the room. Michael stood and followed him. Stay in this room, Isabel, he said, and when she didn't immediately agree, he turned back to her. Promise me? I'll stay in this room. May I borrow your phone? I'd like to text someone. It wasn't like Michael to show her any affection in public, and Sinclair was standing right there in the doorway. Yet when Michael leaned towards her, she thought he was going to kiss her. Oh, no, you don't, she whispered. Since I'm just a friend of the family, you can't just kiss me goodbye. Michael laughed. The second the words a friend of the family were out of his mouth, he had known they were going to come back to bite him. Isabel was disappointed by his amused reaction. He was being a real smart ass, but he didn't seem to mind. Sure I can, he said as he leaned down, clasped her chin and kissed her. After rattling her, he said, Actually, I was just handing you my phone and was going to suggest that you call Dylan and catch him up on what is going on. But then you asked me to kiss you. He walked out of the room and pulled the door shut behind him, leaving her speechless. OMG. See, my phones are not coming on. What is the devil? I guess it was from the thunderstorm last night. Oh well. We will continue reading. We will use what we have. We are on to chapter 28 of the book Grace Under Fire. Guys, I really do hope we finish reading this book by the end of this coming week. I want to finish reading this book. I have another book to read. And another book and another book. Jehovah. Come on. Chapter 28. It simply wasn't possible to shame him. She thought he would at least apologize for his lame answer to the inspector. But did he? Of course not. And yet, after the way he kissed her, it was difficult for her to stay angry. She called Dylan, got voicemail, and left a long message catching him up on the latest developments. Then she texted Lexi and Damon to let them know where she was. She didn't mention the mess her life was in at the moment. She told both of them how much she missed them and promised that as soon as she was back in Boston, she would call them. When she ended her text, she could hear the inspector and Michael standing right outside the door talking. Sinclair was asking legal questions, and Michael's quick responses showed he knew all the answers. Why wouldn't he? Like his father and his brothers, Michael loved the law. A few minutes later, the two men walked into the makeshift interrogation room, pulled up chairs, and sat down facing the suspect. Sinclair placed the thick manila envelope. Look that had been passed on Ferris's face changed the second the door opened. He straightened in his chair, forced his motion of a serene expression, and tried to sound serene when he said, "I don't understand why I'm here. I would appreciate an explanation." "Weren't the charges explained to you when you were arrested?" Sinclair asked. "Yes, they were. I thought I heard attempted murder, but I knew that couldn't be right." "You had the right to free legal advice." "I don't need it," Ferris insisted. "I want to clear this up. It's all a huge mistake." "You have me confused with someone else. I tried to explain to the officers that they have got the wrong man, but they wouldn't listen. I'd like to establish a timeline," Sinclair said, ignoring Ferris's plea of innocence. "That's fine with me. I'll be happy to help." "Where have you been the last 2 weeks? And what have you been doing?" "I've been taking it easy, relaxing," he said. "What's your occupation?" Smiling, Ferris said, "I'm a jack of all trades, a handyman. I can fix most anything that isn't electrical. I'm in between jobs right now." He thought to add, "But I've got a big job coming up, a really big job. It's guaranteed a great pay." Sinclair nodded, then asked, "Have you taken any trips in the past 2 weeks?" "No, I just lazed around. I went to pubs every night." "You didn't take a flight to Boston, Massachusetts?" Ferris shook his head. "No," he scoffed, as though it were a ridiculous question. Sinclair opened the folder and placed on the table a photo of Ferris getting off the plane at Logan Airport in Boston. "Oh, that," Ferris said with a shrug and a shaky laugh. "It was just a quick trip in and out. I only stayed a couple of days." "I thought he said he hadn't been out of the country." "Oh." "Do you know a man named Leon Jacoby?" "No." Ferris looked from Sinclair to Michael and back again. "Why do you ask?" Sinclair placed another photo in front of Ferris. "Isn't this you greeting Jacoby?" "Why, yes, that is me," he answered. Ferris didn't seem fazed that he had been caught in his lies. The man oozed confidence and acted as though he really believed he was soon going to be walking out the door a free man. He must have thought Sinclair didn't have sufficient evidence to keep him locked up, and these questions were nothing more than a fishing expedition in the hope of discovering information. Sinclair was about to rip Ferris's confidence out from under him. "Do you know a young lady named Grace Isabel McKenna?" "Who?" "Grace Isabel McKenna," he patiently repeated. "No." Sinclair stacked his hands on top of the folder. "We have a witness who will testify that you and Jacoby were following Miss McKenna from the Hamilton Hotel in Boston." "No, I wasn't following anyone." Sinclair continued. "The witness is Detective Craig Walsh. He's the man you shot." No, Ferris stammered. "That's not true. I didn't shoot anyone. There's also another witness." "Who?" "Miss McKenna saw you standing on the corner, watching her." "She's mistaken. She must have seen someone who looks like me." Sinclair didn't seem bothered by Ferris's denials. "And of course, there's other evidence." Ferris sat up a little straighter. "Like what?" "We have your gun." "My gun?" "I don't own any guns." "The gun Miss McKenna used to kill your friend Leon Jacoby had her fingerprints on it. But there were also Detective Walsh's fingerprints." And Sinclair paused to let the tension build. "And what?" "And yours, Ferris. Yours. Your fingerprint was also on that gun. They found your fingerprints on the barrel, the back of the grip, and on the magazine release. You were all over that gun." Ferris wiped a bead of sweat from his brow. Sinclair tapped the folder. I've got enough in here to put you away for a very long time, and we haven't even started talking about the flash drive yet. The color left Ferris's face. He's in a panic, Michael thought. He must have finally realized, with all the evidence stacked against him, he was in deep trouble. Clearing his throat, Ferris said, "Flash drive? What flash drive?" Finding the charade tiring, Sinclair turned to Michael. "What do you think?" Michael stared at Ferris when he answered, "I think he's wasting your time. He has done nothing but lied since we sat down." "Lie? I have not lied," Ferris protested. Pointing to Michael, he asked, "Who is he? I have a right to know." Michael's distinct Boston accent told him that Michael wasn't from around these parts, but it made Ferris all the more guarded and anxious. "I've been remiss in not introducing you sooner," Sinclair said with mock courtesy. Tilting his head towards Michael, he told Ferris he already knows who you are. "Oscar Ferris, this is Michael Buchanan. He's an attorney from Boston. Now, why don't you tell me about the flash drive?" "What flash drive?" Ferris's phony innocence was wearing thin. "The flash drive that fell out of your pocket on the street in Boston. The same one Detective Watch picked up. That's the flash drive I want to talk about." "I don't know anything about it." "Yes, you do," Sinclair countered, looking to Michael for help. "Do you have any questions for him?" "I'm not going to answer," Ferris began. Michael deliberately interrupted him. "I should probably tell him what's going to happen to him. He's not going to like it, unless you think I shouldn't tell him. You are in charge here." "It's quite all right," Sinclair said, leaning back in his chair and gesturing towards Ferris with a wave of his hand. "Go ahead and tell him." Michael shrugged. "I might as well. He's going to find out." Highly agitated now, Ferris wiggled his way to the edge of his chair. "Just tell me." "You know, Ferris, you're not helping yourself," Sinclair said. "What do you mean?" "If you want any consideration or leniency, you start cooperating before it's too late." "When is it too late?" Michael answered. "When the feds get a hold of you. Once that happens, there isn't anything Inspector Sinclair can do for you." "What?" "That can't be true. The feds don't have any power here." It was apparent that Ferris had a less than rudimentary knowledge of the law, and Michael used that to his advantage. "Here's what's going to happen to you. Inspector Sinclair will take you to Inverness, where he will complete the necessary paperwork and sign off on the case. He will then hand you over to 2 U.S. Marshals. They will escort you to Boston, Massachusetts, where you will be charged with attempted murder. The federal prosecutor will ask for the death penalty because it was a murder for hire," he said, "and he'll get it too." "Yes, he will," Sinclair agreed, going along with whatever Michael said. Wait. Just wait a minute. I'm not American," Ferris reminded. His gaze kept bouncing back and forth between Michael and Sinclair. "The crimes were committed in Boston," Sinclair pointed out. You might want to start preparing yourself for life in an American federal prison." "I understand the treatment by the guards is brutal if a prisoner gives them any trouble." Nodding, Sinclair added, "Have heard stories." "I know all about the federal prisons in the United States," Ferris said. "I heard from a reliable source that they chain prisoners to the wall in their cells with their hands behind their heads." "What the hell? Chain prisoners to walls? Maybe during the Spanish Inquisition or in cartoons," Michael thought. Sinclair didn't refute Ferris's ideas. "So you have an understanding of what it's going to be like?" "Yes," Ferris agreed, "and I'm not going." Sinclair interrupted him. "I'm not promising you anything, but perhaps an arrangement can be made with the federal agents. You could be tried here and serve your sentence here." Ferris leapt at the possibility. "Yes, I want to be here, but I'm not going down for attempted murder. I didn't try to murder anyone. Now that Ferris was more cooperative, Sinclair said, if you want my help, you're going to have to start answering my questions. No more lies. He added, and you can begin by telling us where you got the flash drive. No one gave it to me. It's mine. There were papers inside an envelope with a lot of information about a young woman, Grace Isabel McKenna, Sinclair supplied. Yes, Ferris answered. I read all the pages, made a photo of them, and put them on a flash drive. I didn't want to carry the papers around with me. Someone could get hold of them and read them, and I couldn't think of a safe place to hide them. I knew if I tried to memorize all the information, I would forget something by the time I told Jacoby. When Ferris didn't continue, Sinclair prodded. So you copied them? Yes, I did. Then I burnt the papers. I thought it would be safe for me to travel with the flash drive. Still, I didn't want to leave it just anywhere, like in a hotel room. Too dangerous if the wrong people got a hold of it. Laptops got stolen all the time. Was there anything else in the envelope? Yes, Ferris answered. Money. Who gave you the letter? You mean instructions? Yes. Don't you want to know how much money? Answer my question, Sinclair demanded. I was getting to it. There's no reason to snap at me. I'm cooperating. Sinclair's neck was turning red. It was obvious he was close to losing his patience. Michael, on the other hand, was as calm as a soft breeze. Curtains like Ferris didn't faze him. You still haven't answered my question, Sinclair said. What was the question? Since Sinclair looked as though he was about to shout, Michael decided to help out. Why don't you start at the beginning? Who gave you the envelope? A solicitor in Dunrose. The name? Sinclair snapped. McCarthy. Walter McCarthy. I was one of his clients. He got me out of several legal problems, none of which were my fault, he rushed to add. Even though the interview was being recorded, Sinclair pulled out a pen and a notepad and began to take notes. McCarthy hired me to do a job, Ferris continued. He knew he could count on me. He called me and asked me to come to his office. He said he needed me to do him a favor, but I'd get paid. He gave me the envelope and told me what he wanted me to do. And what was that? I was told to fly to Boston, meet Jacoby, and give him information. I was just the messenger, he repeated. Who wrote the kill? Michael caught himself in time. Who found her itinerary? Was it McCartney? I asked him that very question. He said no. It was one of his clients, but he wouldn't tell me who. He promised me he would pay me the full amount once the job was done. I stopped worrying about the money, then because I trusted McCarthy. McCarthy knew what was in that envelope, didn't he? Ferris didn't hesitate. Yes, the papers in the envelope he gave me were copies. He kept the originals, and he told me he was keeping them in a safe place just in case. In case of what? He didn't say. Sinclair looked up from his notepad. Let's move on. I want to talk about that day in Boston. Tell us what happened. I want to understand. I was never going to kill anyone. I want you to understand. I was never going to kill anyone. I couldn't take another person's life. Jacoby was in charge. He decided I would drive the car and he be the lookout. And that's all I was supposed to do. But after I parked, Jacoby wouldn't let me leave. He insisted that I go with him and watch out for trouble. Ferris looked anxiously from Michael to Sinclair. I tell you, I didn't want to hurt anybody. I was just supposed to give the information. It was Jacoby who made me go with him. He handed me a gun. I tried to get out of there, but Jacoby was mean, real mean. He could have killed me. He promised he would take care of everything. All we had to do was follow her until she was alone, And that turned out to be easy because she walked from the hotel and kept on walking. She damn near wore us out. She never noticed us following her because she kept to the shadows. Then the trouble started. Michael wasn't so calm now. Once Ferris started talking in such a cold, detached voice about Isabel, every muscle in Michael's body tensed for a fight, and all he could think about was putting his fist through Ferris's face. Ferris went on. She stopped, then turned around and started back. We had to scramble to stay hidden. Jacoby went ahead to find a spot, and I found what I thought was the perfect place. And all of a sudden, this guy gets in my face. That guy is Detective Craig Walsh. Michael informed him. Which one of you shot him? Sinclair asked. He already knew the answer, but was curious to find out if Ferris would tell the truth. He shot himself, Ferris said, and that's the honest truth. He grabbed my gun and shot himself while I was trying to get it out of his hands. I knew Jacoby wanted his gun back. I'd have to pay him for it. You were saying there was a struggle? Sinclair stated, once again trying to bring him back on track. Yes, that's right. There was a struggle, which he started. I didn't want him to shoot me, but he got hold of my gun, and he wouldn't give it back. What would you have done if he had given it back to you? Sinclair wanted to know. I would have run away. It all happened so fast. The guy, the detective I was fighting with, hit me hard and knocked me down. I didn't know if he knocked me out or not. It was a pretty hard hit for someone who had just shot himself. I could feel him pulling on me, but I couldn't do anything about it because my head was spinning and my eyes wouldn't open. I think the detective was looking for another gun. My flash drive must have fallen out of my pocket, and he picked it up. Shaking his head, he looked down at the floor and exhaled a long, slow breath, as though telling his story was physically draining. When I got my wits about me and looked around, I was all alone. I thought Jacoby had taken off and left me, but then I heard gunshots. I knew it wouldn't be the detective who took my gun. There was so much blood on the ground. I figured he was on his way to dying. I got up and went to the corner, and I saw Jacoby on the ground, and that girl was still alive. He didn't get it done. It? Sinclair asked. He wanted Ferris to spell it out. Ferris began to squirm in his chair. Look, I didn't have anything against her. Handing over information about her was just a job, and I needed the money. Michael could feel his control slipping. Losing his temper in an interrogation had never happened before. When he worked, his focus and discipline were absolute. This was different, though, and he wasn't even running it. He wanted to destroy the man sitting across the table. Ferris was talking about Isabel as though she had as much value as a speck of dust. Sinclair glanced at Michael, saw his expression, and rushed to finish the questioning. Ferris also noticed Michael's expression. Tilting his head towards Michael, he lowered his voice and said, The way he's watching me, it's what? Sinclair asked. It's scary, he blurted. He looks like he wants to kill me. Michael's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. I'm a law-abiding man, he said. In other words, he can't kill you, Sinclair said. Isn't that right? Michael nodded. Do I think the world would be a better place without you taking up space, Ferris? Yes, I do. I really do. Inspector Sinclair is correct, he added. I can't and I won't kill you because murder is against the law. I can make your life damn miserable, though, and I plan to do exactly that. Why? Ferris asked, genuinely perplexed. I didn't do anything to you. Oh, dear God, Sinclair murmured. Turning to Michael, he said, I'll help you bury the body. That comment took the edge off Michael's anger. Thanks. Scaring me won't get you anywhere, Ferris said defiantly. I've been cooperating, and I've been honest with you. Yes, you have been cooperating, Sinclair admitted. Just a couple more questions. How did McCarthy know Jacoby? Ferris shrugged. I don't know. Maybe he got the name from one of his clients. Some of them are criminals. Not me, but some. The evening after Jacoby was killed, you went to the Hamilton Hotel. Miss McKenna saw you in the lobby. I knew she saw me. It really put me in a panic. I just thought I could find out how long she was booked at the hotel and then call McCarthy and tell him maybe I could still get paid. Michael didn't show any reaction, but he wondered if Ferris had any idea how close he was to flying through the wall. Looks like you won't be getting that sweet job now. What was it? Sinclair wasn't really interested, but he wanted to keep Ferris talking while he went through the folder to make sure he had covered everything. I was going to be on the crew building a lot of houses, big, fancy houses, he stressed. With a hunting club and a golf course, it's going to be real exclusive. That's what McCarthy told me anyway. He was always in a chatty mood when he drank. Where are those houses going to be built? Michael asked. I'm not sure. It's somewhere up around Dunross. McCarthy told me one of his clients is selling the land to some big development company out of London, the Patterson Group. The Patterson Group? Michael suggested. Yes, that's the one. Michael half expected to hear a roar coming from the other room if Isabel was listening, and he was sure she was. She had to be furious. I'm in trouble, ain't I? Ferris asked. He was just now figuring... Are you just now figuring it out? Michael slowly nodded. Yes, you are, Sinclair said. Ferris looked as though he was going to cry. If McCarthy was still around, he'd get me out of this mess. He'll tell you I was just delivering information. What do you mean, if he was still around? Where did he go? Sinclair asked. He died 2 or 3 days ago. I don't know exactly when. I had just gotten back from Boston, and I was at the pub when I heard. Everyone was talking about it. They said his heart just gave out. It was a shock, though some people said they weren't surprised. He was a glutton for women and whiskey. McCartney had been the next to be hauled in for interrogation. With enough pressure, they had hopefully gotten the lawyer to give up the name of his client. Sinclair couldn't hide his disappointment. He was now going to have to figure out another way to hunt down the man who wrote the instructions, or, as Michael called it, the kill order. You know, Inspector, the more I think about it, the more convinced I become that I didn't do anything wrong. Ferris sat back in his chair and crossed his arms. His smug confidence had returned. I didn't break any laws. I was just the messenger. I think with a good solicitor, I'll be let go. Michael couldn't listen to another word. He had had enough. He quickly got up and left the room. OMG. Isabel don't even know how close she had come. How close she had come to death. Michael is in the place. Michael! What's up, Michael? How are you doing, Michael? How is everybody doing? Good to see you all. Gonna get me excited when I see you all come to listen to the reading. But why don't come early in the morning, come listen to the Bible reading? I did the Bible reading this morning, and I don't think I see 6 people pass through. Only know so when I wake up in the morning, the first thing I need to do is to give thanks, is to read the Bible. Trev, be quiet. But anyway, welcome into the live, everybody. Michael and Wingsome, and I'm not seeing everybody in the chat because I put the flowers there, but that's okay. Welcome into the chat, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm not giving watch hours this morning because my devices are not coming on. So I'm waiting for my son to wake up, and then once he wakes up, he will help me to figure out what in the world is going on. because I surely don't know why my things are not coming on. All right, so let us continue with the reading, gentle people. We are going to read also chapter 29 this morning, and I know you all are having fun with this. We have read now for about an hour. I said I was going to read for an hour. We got 10 minutes more. All right, chapter 29. Chapter 29 of the book Grace Under Fire. Isabel was ready to pitch a fit, yet another expression she had picked up from her Aunt Nora, but in this instance it definitely worked. She had heard every word Ferris said, and she was beyond furious. Someone was selling land near Dunross to the Patterson Group. What land could it be but Glen McKenna? And what was Reed's involvement? Was he playing both angles? Was he also trying to broker a deal with someone else? Some weasel who evidently thought he owned the land and could sell it? And just who was this weasel? Only one name came to mind: Clive Harkers, the terror of the Highlands. She was the one little glitch in their fantasy plan. They would have to get rid of her in order for their scheme to work, and that just wasn't going to happen. Michael found her pacing around the desk in a small office. He motioned for the officer with her to leave, closed the door behind him, and then went to Isabel and pulled her into his arms. He needed to hold her close to know she was safe, for he was still reeling from hearing Ferris so casually talk about the plan to kill her. Isabel relaxed against him and closed her eyes. A long minute passed without either of them saying a word. She was thinking how secure she felt with his strong arms around her. He was thinking about doing bodily harm to the bastard who wanted to kill her. "Michael, you're squeezing me." He lessened his hold, but wouldn't allow her to step back. His lips touched her neck. She whispered, "That was some interesting interview, wasn't it? I wanted to throw Ferris through the wall. I would have helped." "Yeah, yeah," he said, smiling. He let go of her. "Could we leave?" "Not yet, but soon," he promised. "It shouldn't take long, though." "Shouldn't take long," she had learned, was code for at least an hour. Danny kept checking on her and finally sat with her and told her all sorts of interesting and horrifying facts about Clive Harkers, including one that involved Danny's own family. His brother-in-law had ended up in the hospital because of Clive Harkers' temper. When Michael and Isabel left the station, a chill had settled in the air, and it was so dark they could see only as far as the headlights their cars allowed. "How do people walk around out here at night?" Isabel asked. "You can't see your hand in front of your face. Flashlights and phones." "I suppose," she agreed. Are you staying close to Dunross tonight?" "No." She waited for him to elaborate, and when he didn't, she asked, "Where are we staying?" "Away from here, far away from here." Exasperated, she said, "That's helpful. That's a place about an hour away from Dunross." "Nick's working on it, working on finding a different place to stay." "What about Inspector Sinclair? Will he know where we'll be?" "He thinks we are going to stay at the Dorn, but we aren't going to stay there." "No? It's too easy for someone to get in and out." "Will you tell the inspector where we are?" "No, I don't want anyone to know." Boy, I tell you, Michael is very smart, guys. Michael is very smart. I think this is a smart thing to do, not to let anyone, not even the detective, know where they are sleeping. Because while they are sleeping, the detective don't need to know where they are. He needs to know where they are when they have to interact with him, when they have to sit down with him and have an interview. But outside of that, he don't need to know where they are. So Michael is doing the right thing here. She understood. It wasn't a matter of trusting the inspector, but the more people who knew their location, the bigger the chance of that information getting out. Michael seemed preoccupied. She watched him for a minute and then remarked, "You are working something out in your mind, aren't you?" "Just going over tomorrow's schedule. The only appointment we have is with Donald Gladstone." He nodded. "I'd like to go to McCarthy's office either before or after your appointment. Sinclair has offices there as well. He's probably on his way to McCarthy's house now. Danny told me Donruss is a very tiny village," she said. "McCarthy's office can't be far from Gladstone. Danny's the fast talker at the police station, right?" Yes, Danny had first-hand knowledge of what a mean bully Arcus is. "How is that?" "Danny's brother-in-law, Tim, and his pregnant wife, Larisse, have lived in a small cottage on Glen McKenna for several years. They were just sitting down to supper one night when Glen Arcus knocked on their door and told them that he was the owner of Glen McKenna and that their rent had been doubled. They had 5 days to pay up or a late fee would be tacked on. Can you believe this?" She didn't wait for Michael to answer. Tim stood up to Clive and said he wasn't going to pay him anything. "Who did Tim usually pay the rent to?" Michael asked. "To Creme Gibson, the groundskeeper." "What did Arcus do when Tim refused to pay him?" "He told him he'd be sorry and left. The next evening, Tim was walking home alone and Clive ambushed him. Danny said Clive's a big man and he beat Tim near to death. He broke his jaw, Michael. He broke his jaw. Tim ended up in the hospital and had to have surgery. His jaw is still wired shut. Can you imagine how painful that has to be?" "Was Arcus arrested?" "Yes," she answered. He's out now on bail, but he's bragging to anyone who would listen that he never touched Tim, and he has witnesses who will testify on his behalf. He was dark out, and Danny told me Tim's wife is begging him not to testify against Arcus. She's terrified of him. I wonder how many other complaints have there been?" Danny said Arcus's temper is explosive. He must not have impulse control. Apparently not. As he drove through the darkness, looking for road signs to navigate his way, he thought about their plans for the next day. "We need a map of Donruss. You might be able to pull up directions on your laptop. I know Gladstone's office address. It was easy to remember. His office is at 3 Lickly Lake Road." "Lickly Lake?" Smiling, he said, "Yeah, that would be easy to remember." He pulled over and called Sinclair to get McCarthy's office address. When he ended the call, he said, "I bet it isn't too far from Gladstone." He laughed. "Not far at all. McCarthy's address is 3 Lickly Lane Road. They're in the..." She wondered, and if so, should we trust Donald Gladstone now that we know McCarthy hired men to kill me? Could he be in on it? She continued without letting Michael respond. Still, he asked Detective Walsh to talk to me because he was worried about me. And why would he do that if he was in on it? If he trusts Donald Gladstone, then maybe I should too. Trust no one, Isabel. Isabel tilted her head back and stared up at the vast night sky, catching glimpses of the moon through breaks in the clouds. An old song she had composed came to mind, and she began to softly hum it. Michael liked the melody and asked, "Did you write that?" "Yes, I did. It's a romantic song about everlasting love and commitment. I call it What a Crock." He burst out laughing. "I swear I never know what you are going to say. What a crock. When did you become so cynical?" "Since I figured out you are going to break my heart." She thought, but didn't say. "It's just a song." "Well, sing it to me." For some reason, she was embarrassed to sing with just him in the car and darkness all around them. It seemed too intimate. She shook her head at first, and then, with a little coaxing from Michael, she gave in. She sang the song, but wouldn't look at him until she was finished. That wasn't cynical at all, he said. He wasn't one to give a lot of praise, and she was surprised when he added, "That was really beautiful, Isabel." They passed through one village and then another, the only light coming from the cottages along the route. It seemed they had been driving a long time, but when she checked her watch, less than half an hour had gone by. A short time later, they pulled off the main road onto a side road almost too narrow for two cars to pass. Tall trees hovered on both sides for a short distance until there was a clearing and they drove into a lighted circle. The grand entrance to a huge stone manor house that had been turned into a luxury hotel. Nick had pulled off another impossible feat, securing a room for them at this exclusive, out-of-the-way resort. Though the manor had been modernized, it still displayed the elegance of a past century. Even more appealing to Isabel, it offered 24-hour room service. There was a charming pub at the back of the main floor, and they could have stepped in for a quick dinner, but all she wanted was a hot shower. Their room was quite large. The king-size poster bed seemed enormous after the beds she had been sleeping in the past couple of nights. In this one, Michael would have room to move around. There was also a long plush sofa across the room, should he decide to sleep there. "What do you think? Will we be okay?" he asked. "I'm never going to leave." He laughed. "I guess that's a yes." A small alcove led to a large, nearly renovated... Oh my God, my mind and my mouth are not coordinating. A small alcove led to a large, newly renovated bathroom around the corner. There was a huge shower enclosed in glass and a large marble vanity with two sinks. But what drew Isabel's attention was the old-fashioned clawfoot tub in front of the stained glass window. A hot tub was just what she needed to help her decompress. Her mind was filled with worries. James Reed, the Patterson Group, Harkers, all of them were motivated by greed, and all would love to have her gone. On a marble shelf adjacent to the tub were bottles of various bath salts. One of them was called Wildflowers. The scent was divine. She sprinkled some into the water, got in, and with a sigh settled back and let the water wash away some of her stress. There wasn't anything she could do about that problem tonight, she reasoned. Tomorrow would be soon enough to take on the vultures. Her concern now was for Michael. What was going to happen when they returned to Boston? Most likely, Michael would leave her as fast as possible. The image of the cartoon character Wile E. Coyote taking off at warp speed came to mind and actually made her smile. She hadn't told Michael how she felt, and he hadn't told her. Why was she playing the waiting game? Probably because she was the one who had started all of this. She had seduced him, not the other way around. Time for some honesty. This was more than attraction. As scared as she was, she couldn't ignore the truth any longer. She was hopelessly in love with Michael. Now, how in God's name had she let that happen? She made up her mind. When they returned to Boston, she would tell him she loved him. At this point, she didn't care if he crushed her because he didn't feel the same way. At least she wouldn't be in limbo. She would know the truth. Then she don't know the truth by now. That Michael just want little skin. What's wrong with her? Isabel took her time soaking in the tub, then removed the hotel's thick cotton robe from the hook on the far wall and slipped into it. As she was trying the belt around her waist, she heard the doorbell ring. Their dinner had arrived. She walked into the bedroom and was just about to tell Michael she wasn't hungry, but then He lifted the silver domes from the plates, revealing the grilled salmon with brown rice and root vegetables, along with thick, crusty rolls and sweet butter. And she couldn't resist. She ate every bit, with one exception. Again, there was a side dish of mushy peas. She didn't touch them. As soon as the table was removed from the room, Michael locked the door and turned to her. I want to stay right here. Understand? Don't go anywhere. He disappeared into the bathroom before she could ask him where he thought she would go. Isabel removed her robe and draped it over a chair, then put on a pair of baggy sweatpants and an oversized red Kansas City Chiefs t-shirt. She had no intentions of trying to seduce Michael tonight. She was exhausted, and comfort won out over attempting to look desirable. The bed had already been turned down, and after her long, hard day, she couldn't wait to sink into the soft, white comforter and pillows. But first, she needed to talk to Michael about tomorrow. She didn't want any surprises, though she expected that there might be one or two. After rubbing some lotion on her arms and legs, she sat back down against the headboard and patiently waited for him to return to the bedroom. Unlike Isabel, it didn't take Michael any time at all to shower. He knew he looked scruffy, but he didn't feel like shaving tonight. He brushed his teeth, put on a pair of old boxer shorts, and was ready for bed. Rounding the corner into the bedroom, he took a couple of steps and came to an abrupt stop. He couldn't move. Isabel's face was scrubbed clean, and her hair was wet and brushed back. The clothes she wore were shapeless, and yet he couldn't take his eyes off her as she swung her legs over the side of the bed, walked across the room, and picked up the television remote. The way she moved was so sensual. Isabel had turned everything upside down. Sex without any kind of emotional commitment used to be his standard. He wouldn't allow any complications or expectations. What had he called it? Oh yeah, a pleasurable activity. What a cocky bastard he was. He was nearly overwhelmed by his need for her tonight. He closed the distance between them. She was still holding the remote when he took her in his arms and kissed her warm, soft lips. Her clothes, the remote, and his shorts were on the floor before they reached the bed. Their passion was blissful and beautiful. When both were breathless and spent, Michael raised up on his elbows. He could feel her heart pounding against his. He didn't have enough energy to move. He wanted to savor the feeling of her against him. Are you okay, baby? Isabel couldn't make herself let go of him yet. If we keep this up, it's going to kill us. You know what? You are right. He gave her a heart-stopping smile and said, Yeah. You are pretty pleased with yourself, aren't you? She asked as she trailed her fingertips down the side of his neck. He slowly nodded. There was a seductive glimmer in his eyes. Give me a minute, and I'll try to kill us again. She sighed. What a wonderful way to go. Guys, that is the end of chapter 29 of the book Grace Under Fire. Guys, this book is fiery, popping with romance and suspense and everything in between, and I am loving it, and I hope you all are enjoying the reading as well, because as for me, I am into it. I am into it like Michael and Isabel. And I'm enjoying it. All right, guys, I'm going to read chapter 30. Let me see how many pages chapter 30 has. Let me see if my brain can coordinate enough with my... Wow, chapter 30 is long. Can coordinate enough with my brain can coordinate enough with my tongue for me to read this. What do you all say? Do I say we read some more? Yes, it's Sunday morning. Let's read some more. Chapter 30. Isabel wasn't a superstitious person, and she didn't get spooked easily. but walking into Walter McCarthy's office, she felt as though she were entering into Satan's waiting room. The walls were painted a garish red, which would have been okay, she supposed, except for the large painting of a clown with a freakingly manic grin on his face hanging on the wall. Looking around, she noticed the other clowns too. There was a clown coffee cup and two small stone statues of clowns being used as paperweights on McCarthy's desk. Large clown bookends sat on a shelf against the wall, and a clown keychain dangled from a hook next to a large paper shredder. When Isabel was a little girl, clowns frightened her, but now that she was an adult, they just creeped her out. She and Michael had arrived for their appointment with Gladstone a half an hour early. Sinclair had notified them that he had secured a search warrant and would be looking through McCarthy's personal records. Michael was hoping he could help. Client files were off limits unless Gladstone was McCarthy's partner. Then he could look through those papers. Michael would soon find out. The law officers were in an old two-story stone building. Only the first floor was occupied. They were greeted warmly by Nessie, a plump, middle-aged woman wearing a blue knit cardigan over a floral blouse. Her cropped brown hair was swept back on both sides and held by simple black barrettes, and a pair of reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck. She sat behind the desk in the middle of the reception area. "I'm sorry, Mr. Gladstone isn't here yet," she told them apologetically. "We wanted to have time to talk to Inspector Sinclair first. Perhaps take a look at Mr. McCarthy's office ourselves," Michael explained. Her smile faded and was replaced with a worried frown. "Oh yes, Inspector Sinclair," she said. "He and one of his officers are upstairs. He has a search warrant and is going through Mr. McCarthy's personal things. I'm not quite sure what they're looking for, but I think I heard one of them say something about a contract for murder." Shaking her head and raising her hand to her chest, she added, "I must not have heard that right." Nessie then pointed out that McCarthy's office was on her left and Gladstone's office was on her right. There was a third office behind her that wasn't occupied. Down a short hall, there were stairs that led to the second floor, which was used for storage. There were boxes and boxes and boxes of McCarthy's personal papers stored in plastic containers up there, she said. Some of them go back 10, 15 years. The man never threw anything away until recently. The last couple of weeks before he died, he got into a shredding frenzy. "I'm not sure why," she admitted. "It's going to take the inspector and his team a long time to go through everything." She pointed up to the ceiling. "You'll find him up there right now." While Michael had gone up to talk to Sinclair, Isabel stayed behind and slipped into McCarthy's office. As she stood there gazing around the room, she couldn't help but wonder what sort of person would feel comfortable in such a bizarre environment. She also thought it might be a good idea to get a tetanus shot before she touched anything. McCarthy's proclivity for hair-raising art was disturbing. But the appalling condition of his office was disgusting. The man was a slob. There were papers stacked everywhere. The piles on the floor were so high, one pile of papers had slipped down into another pile, which spilled into another and another and another, mimicking the domino effect. The room appeared to have been ransacked, which is what Isabel had concluded, until Nessie walked in to join her and explained that it was always disheveled. I begged him to let the cleaners in, but he didn't want anyone moving his files around. He swore he knew where everything was in the clutter. All those stacks by the window are to be shredded. I've been helping him get it done. I doubt he could find anything in this mess, Isabel remarked. That rug under his desk hadn't been vacuumed or swept in years, and the air is so stale. When Inspector Sinclair arrived, he let me open the door to the reception area, but I didn't dare open any windows. Papers would be flying everywhere. McCarthy's decorating choices were certainly different, Isabel said, tilting her head towards the clown monstrosity on the wall. The painting was huge, and the clown's eyes seemed to follow her around the room, and that, she decided, went way beyond creepy. Mr. McCarthy told me the painting was a gift, and he had to hang it so feelings wouldn't be hurt. He must have had a soft heart to be concerned about someone else's feelings. Oh, no. There wasn't anything soft about him. Nessie shook her head and said, I know it's wrong to speak ill of the dead, but I have to admit, Mr. McCarthy was difficult, impatient, and distrustful. He locked his door even when he went to the washroom or lunch. I think he thought I would sneak cleaners into his office. While he was gone, he didn't want anyone touching anything. He was terribly secretive, and yet he was also quite nosy. He had to know everyone's business. Once Nessie started talking about McCarthy, she didn't hold back. She had a lot to say, and none of it was complimentary. If Mr. Abernathy hadn't been here, I would have quit. He and Mr. McCarthy were partners in the firm, but as different as night and day. Mr. McCarthy's behavior didn't bother me because Mr. Abernathy was so nice to me. He always said please and thank you, and he praised me for doing a good job. I hated to see him go. Where did he go? He was ill, she said. He never complained, but I could tell he wasn't feeling well. He cut down to 2 days a week, and he referred most of his clients to other solicitors, but there were several clients he kept. His friend, Mr. Gladstone, took over the office and his remaining clients. Mr. Abernathy was able to retire then. He was quite pleased with Mr. Gladstone stepping in for him. He felt guilty, though, because he deliberately failed to mention that his partner, Mr. McCarthy, was so difficult. Are you pleased with Mr. Gladstone? Oh my, yes, she said. Mr. Gladstone is a prince to work for. He never raises his voice like Mr. McCarthy did. That's good to hear. Nessie folded her hands as though in prayer and said, It's so odd to me. Life is full of surprises, isn't it? Nothing is ever what you expect. Mr. Abernathy looked so pale, and he was so thin and slow on his feet. Mr. McCarthy was the complete opposite. He was robust and full of energy. He kept liquor in his office. He claimed it was for his clients, but I knew he drank with them. He closed down Jolly Jack's pub nearly every night. I heard that he had a heart problem, but I didn't give it any substance. He looked as healthy as an ox, though I really shouldn't speak ill of the dead. McCarthy was quite the womanizer. Every time she said she shouldn't speak of the dead, she continues talking. OMG. Since Nessie was looking at her expectantly, Isabel said, Is that so? Yes, Nessie said. And look at them now. Mr. Abernathy is still walking around, and I hear he's feeling better since he is retired. And Mr. McCarthy? He keeled over dead. I don't think he had any warning. How did he die? A heart attack, she answered. He was slumped over his desk with a full glass of whiskey in his hand. The coroner said it must have been quite quick because he didn't spill a drop. Who found him? I did, Nessie said with a slight shiver. I came in the other morning and there he was. He gave me quite a fright, and I had a good scream before I called for help. I thought he might have passed out from whiskey or fallen asleep, but when I nudged him and called his name, he didn't move. I touched him, looking for a pulse, and he was stone cold. Then he died the night before, Isabel concluded. Nessie nodded. That's what the coroner thought. I'll tell you, it was difficult to walk in his office after he was carted away, but I felt I should at least straighten his desk. I put the papers in 2 stacks and left everything else alone. I would have locked the door, but I don't have a key. Nessie stopped talking when Michael and Sinclair appeared in the doorway. Isabel raised her hands as though she expected to be chastised for being there without permission. The door was wide open. Don't worry. I didn't touch anything. Michael surveyed the chaos of files and papers in front of him. There's a lot here to go through, but so far, Sinclair hasn't found the original copy of the orders McCarthy gave Ferris. However, he has discovered a great deal of other incriminating evidence against McCarthy in his personal files. Evidently, he had a secret side business protecting some pretty shady characters. McCarthy didn't just bend the law, he ignored it, Sinclair stated. Isabel didn't press them for details. She would wait until later to find out what McCarthy had been up to, besides taking on a client who wanted to kill her. Sinclair leaned against the desk and asked Nessie, What is it you do here? I answer the phones and take messages. I also do computer work and filing. I assist both of them. Do you book appointments? Yes, I do. I make all the appointments for Mr. Gladstone, but I only schedule some for Mr. McCarthy. Why is that? Sinclair wanted to know. He was very private about a few of his clients. Most of those came to see him after work hours. I always left at 5. Do you ever get any names of those clients? They rarely gave their names. If they happened to call during the day when I was here, and if McCarthy was in his office, I put them through. If Mr. McCarthy wasn't there, John or Harry or Matthew or whatever name they gave would ask for him to call back. No last names and no phone numbers, which made me think some of these clients were up to no good. She was quick to add, though I never had any proof, I was left out of those dealings. She pushed back to reception. She rushed back. I tell you, my eyes and my lips are not coordinating right now. She rushed back to reception to answer the phone. Sinclair moved to McCarthy's desk and scanned the papers that Nessie had neatly stacked. One of the documents caught his attention, and he bent lower to examine it. He silently read for a few seconds, then lifted up and said, Michael, I think you'll find that first document quite interesting. I believe McCarthy may have dropped dead on top of it. It's just a guess, but I wouldn't be surprised. Michael picked up the paper, read it, and smiled. You are right. It is indeed very interesting. What is it? Isabel asked. It's a petition to the court stopping you from taking ownership of Glen McKenna until Clive Harkis's case as the rightful heir can be heard. He added, he is contesting the will. Why does that make you smile? McCarthy died before he could present it. Isabel rushed to his side and read the paper. This will enrage Arcus, don't you think? May I be the one to tell him? Let him figure it out on his own. Looking around the office, she said, how will we ever find out if it was Arcus behind the kill order? The original had to be somewhere. We'll keep searching, Sinclair assured. It's not in his house. We have already looked top and bottom. Then it had to be here, if it exists. Ferris could be lying. I don't think he was, though. Donald Gladstone will have to go through each file bit by bit. May we help? Isabel asked. Michael shook his head. Gladstone was a partner and can act as solicitor for all of McCarthy's clients. Nessie was McCarthy's assistant, so she can help Gladstone. We can't. That's right, Sinclair agreed. We'll have Gladstone and Nessie sort out any privileged information. And now that we have discovered the other activities McCarthy was involved in, we'll pack up everything else and make it to Inverness for investigation. Isabel leaned into Michael's side and whispered, Will they take the painting too? Why? Do you want to buy it? Good God, no! She looked up at him with a twinkle in her eyes. Then again, what? It might be a nice housewarming gift for Kate and Dylan. He had a good laugh. No, you wouldn't. No, it's fun to think about, but I'm not that cruel. Excuse me for interrupting. Nessie called out. Mr. Gladstone is here. Welcome to the live, guys. Thank you all so much for coming. We are reading the book Grace Under Fire, and at this juncture, Michael and Isabel are in Scotland, and as much as they're trying to be safe, they're trying to get as much information about the property that Isabel is inheriting as possible. And the danger has not yet passed for them, because there is Arcos. Clive Arcos is still out there. They're still trying to find the original document for the kill order that was placed on Isabel's head, and they're trying to find any other pertinent information that they could use in the trial of what's the guy's name again? Jesse, the one who had gone to Boston to meet Jacoby in order to take Isabel's life. All right, so let us continue. Welcome into the live, everybody. I see, is Christine there? Is that Christine? I think I see Christine. I think my eyes are doing their own thing tonight, but I think I see Christine. Let us continue. Let me see how many pages I got left in chapter 30. Wow, quite a bit. Quite a bit. And I gotta go make breakfast and all that. Let me see, what time is it actually? Oh, 9:43. All right, 2 more minutes. Donald Gladstone wasn't at all what Isabel expected. The solicitor had a nice smile and a quiet voice that was at odds with his size. The man was at least 6 feet 7 or 8 inches tall and built like a linebacker. He was younger than she had imagined, probably in his early to mid-50s. His cheeks were ruddy, his handshake was firm, and his piercing gray eyes didn't seem to miss much of anything. Compared to McCarthy's cluttered pigsty, Gladstone's office was austere and squeaky clean. There was an old weather desk polished in a glossy shine. 2 captain's chairs upholstered in dark blue leather faced the desk, and another chair sat by the window. An old-fashioned beige metal file cabinet was on the opposite wall. There weren't any paintings or photos on the walls or on the desk, and there weren't any clowns, which told Isabel that Gladstone wasn't a nutcase. All right, that's where we're going to end the reading of this book for today. When we come back, I'm going to try to come back tomorrow morning. When we come back tomorrow morning, we will continue with the reading of the book Grace Under Fire. We will continue reading chapter 30. Once again, I want to say thanks to everybody who came into the live this morning. I hope you all enjoyed the reading as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. All right. Those of you who were here for the Bible reading earlier, thanks to you as well. And I hope you all join me tomorrow morning when I will be back. Tomorrow morning is going to be early though, because you all know tomorrow morning I go to work. So you all got to come in early. 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, that time. No later. By 6 o'clock I should be finished reading, because I should take that half an hour between 6 o'clock and 6:30 to get myself ready to be out the door. So join me again tomorrow morning, guys, when we will continue the reading of the book Grace Under Fire by Julie Garwood. Until then, my friends, this is Trev from Trevessence, where your journey matters. Now have yourselves a great day, everybody. Have yourselves a fantastic Sunday. And for those of you who are starting to celebrate American independence, happy independence to you all as well. All right, guys, I will see you all later. Let me see how many people did come in on the live. Because them people here, see,